Oh, look, there's no doubt. I mean, from our perspective, what we needed from government was an indication of a roadmap and a plan and how they were going to stagger different kinds of openings. So this is a great start, but obviously what we now need is dates. And we need some clarity and some certainty around that. And really, we're going to have to wait until the premiers start issuing those dates before we get too optimistic.
Absolutely. It is all down now to that timeline. Does that remain then a concern for you? I mean, obviously the tourism industry is in disarray at the moment. We still don't know when people can go back to work or when that might start to pick up again. How worrying is that?
Look, it is extremely worrying. And I think probably for the industry also, we're a people industry. So we rely upon the workers who are part of our industry, who give everybody that fabulous experience when they go on holidays or spend time away. And, times have been tough. And many of those people have had to move into other jobs or potentially may make that decision even after the industry opens. So it's something that I think industry is really focused on. But I would say this, that as a whole, the industry is now pretty focused on what recovery looks like and that bright light at the end of the tunnel. And when they can start welcoming Australians in the first instance, and then hopefully New Zealanders, and then hopefully others back into all of our wonderful destinations.
How critical is resuming domestic travel to that recovery process? Is that really the key now? Is the resumption of that?
Look, Australia's a very big country. And yes, the simple answer is aviation will be critical to the rebirth of the domestic tourism economy in the first instance, and hopefully the rebirth of business travel here in Australia too. We do have two of the top 10 most used and most profitable business routes in the world, being Sydney, Brisbane and Sydney, Melbourne. So it's going to be a test to see how quickly those things can come back. But getting the domestic aviation up and running is the first step to potentially our trans-Tasman bubble option.
Yeah, absolutely. And when do you, or what rather has been the impact of state border closures? WA has been closed and various other places. Has that had an impact overall?
Oh, massive. And I do think that the other part of this is confidence. It's all very well to turn the tap back on, but Australians have to feel confident about travelling, that it will be safe. And in many instances too, we have to ask the question, if they've been unemployed, do they have the money? But if they're still in jobs, have they in fact got leave? Because many people will have used up their paid leave as part of this process. So lots of questions to be asked. And in the case of WA, South Australia and Northern Territory, of course, we have very appropriately biosecurity legislation in relation to a whole range of Indigenous communities.
Following the announcement from yesterday, will the Tourism and Transport Forum be working in conjunction with the states and territories on timelines and advising from there?
Look, we've been working with state governments now for many, many, many months and with the federal government. I think essentially because of the bushfires, many of us were very engaged at that stage in trying to help government find solutions, and government was reaching out to industry to understand the problem. When COVID-19 came along, many of those committees and structures just rolled over. So we've been in a fairly well-structured conversation with government for a long time. And right now we're working on the sorts of standards and so forth that might apply across the whole of the industry and in the aviation space that give government a sense of comfort in terms of the safety provisions, because that has to be the number one priority, and also gives the travelling public a sense of certainty and comfort about that too.
And you mentioned from the New South Wales perspective, the bushfires and now COVID-19. Gladys Berejiklian and the Premier has already said that they're going to look at a more slower approach, not necessarily looking to adopt the National Cabinet guidelines quicker than others. Safety is number one, but how big of an impact is it having on the industry?
Look, it is massive. We were on our knees because of the bushfires. COVID-19 has literally, many of our businesses are at less than 4% of their normal turnover, if they've got any turnover at all. For many of them, they're completely shut down. And for many that are in, say, tropical areas, further north and in the Northern Territory, they're now facing the prospect of seasonal issues because their industry normally shuts down for a period during the rainy season. So they could very well find the gates open, but not the right time of the year for visitors.
And from the people you've been speaking to from a tourism operator perspective, how are operators coping?
Well, look, they're powering on because we are a very resilient industry and always have been. But having said that, my great fear is that we're going to lose a lot of terrific operators, and in particularly regional communities, many of those smaller ones that make for the content and the great experiences when you go bush or go trekking on the beach or whatever else it might be. Many of them have not survived the process of the bushfires and now COVID-19. And one thing we have to be very conscious of is that if businesses start up again and we find ourselves having to shut down again, that will be a devastating, completely catastrophic blow.